Hi, I'm Peter from Coffee Parts, and I'm here with Savarino from Anfim Australia looking at this, the Anfim Scody. So Sal, we're looking at the Scody, and this sits in the middle of the Anfim range between the Praktica and the SP2. And it kind of is an evolution of the Super Caimano. So can you tell me more about how this grinder fits in the Enro Group lineup and who this grinder is for?
As you said, it's a grinder that sits in between the Praktica and SP2.
Yep.
For the cafe that's doing a little bit more volume, they're doing 35 kilos a week.
Yep.
Looking for that on-demand main grinder, or a busy cafe that needs to continue on with the look of the SP2 and want a smaller grinder for their singles.
So in saying that, this is a 75mm blade grinder, and it does come out in either hardened steel or in titanium. When the SP2 to Australia only comes out in titanium, they're both 75mm. What I understand, the blades have an actual different pattern on them to compensate for different RPMs in the motors. Is that right?
Yeah, so the SP2 Burrs, the special performance Burrs,
Yep.
the cut of their teeth are longer, so they are a more aggressive and faster grinder,
Yep.
where the Burrs on the Scody aren't as aggressive.
And having the hardened steel and the titanium obviously a harder burr that lasts longer. Generally titanium's around the 2.5 ton capacity.
Yeah, we always say between 2 tons and 2.5 tons, depending on the lighter roast or the darker roast.
Yeah. The lighter roast, obviously the blades last less because it's a harder bean,
Yeah.
and the darker roast is obviously going to be a little bit softer. Looking at this grinder in particular, I love that they're using this cradle. It's one of my favorite cradles in grinders. It really does hold the Portafilter well, and it has been used across the range from the Praktica, obviously this Scody and the SP. And with this, you can put the scale holder. So if you were moving away from grinding into a Portafilter and grinding into a dosing cup, for example, on a scale, being a Kai or otherwise, you can easily run that. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to give baristas a little bit of flexibility, whether they, like you said, they want to go into a dosing cup and have the platform to hold the scale. But we also want to make sure that if they are using portafilters, handles, that a good handle, cradle holder, will actually allow them to work a little bit faster. So that cradle holder is one of the best.
And you got the micro switch right there. So when you lock in your portafilter, you can not only activate the grind, but you can pause halfway through to allow it to settle and then keep going. Is that right?
Yeah, there's 3 modes.
Yep.
With the grinding.
Yep.
The one where we can interrupt, we have a lag time.
Yep.
Then you got the single touch, so
Yep.
it will grind the full amount regardless if you're moving your handle a little bit.
Yep.
Or we can actually take the functionality and put it onto the touchpad.
Yep.
So if they are using that platform, or if they prefer to use a touchpad, they can actually use a touchpad, and that button becomes redundant.
And whether they're using the portafilter or more specifically with the scale, they've got the button here, which allows it just to grind that touch. So if you are grinding to just say 20 grams and 19.9 has come out, you can just touch it in and get that small amount.
Yeah, absolutely. Just that little top up, or if they want to push some coffee through, it's just a quick momentary activation, so quite easy to add or clean.
And when it comes to retention on this grinder, being a larger grinder with larger blades, it's obviously going to have a bit more retention, and they're about a double shot of retention in there, so 22 grams give or take.
Yeah, so whenever you do make an adjustment, just keep that in mind. You've got 22 grams of the pre-existing grind size to purge through. But yeah.
Or being that this is for a 35-40 kilo count and the SP for like an 80, that doesn't make a difference because you are pushing through quite a fair bit.
Yeah, look, we've always had a discussion with our, with roasters and whatnot on how much grind retention, but when you've got a cafe that's moving through their coffee a little bit faster, it does take a little bit of a back seat. More consistency issues. So you want to talk about other, aspects of it, whether how consistent, how easy it is with the workflow.
Yeah, and this grinder in terms of workflow is easy. It's a fast grinder, And a little bit off topic, but something we'll focus a little bit later. But even on the cleaning side, like cleaning where the clump crusher is, it's super easy with just 2 screws there. You can just pull it out, clean your clump crusher and put it back. And it really is, at the end of the day or through service, something that can be done like that.
Look, we always profess cleaning your grinder will make your grinder work better, work more consistent, have a great positive effect on your cup quality.
Yep.
So making it easy to clean was a super important aspect of the development over the years of this grinder.
And to dial in this grinder, it's on a worm adjustment, which is stepless. So you really do, because of the adjustment turning on the side there, it really is easy compared to like the heavy collars or different mechanisms. This has probably one of the easiest dials just on that worm drive.
Yeah, you really can narrow down a micro adjustment. And that could be as easy as looking at the notches on your indicator sticker here. And I know roughly 1 notch adjustment will slow down or speed up your pour by around about 3 seconds.
Yeah. So the SCODY is running 75mm blades, either in the hardened steel, which is this one, or the titanium, being this one. And the main difference between the two is capacity. So they are running the same geometry, but on the hardened steel, you tend to get around about the 800 kilo mark. And with the titanium, you get the 2 to 2.5 tons. It does depend on the roast profile. So the lighter the roast, the slightly less capacity because it is a harder bean. Looking at them, the visual difference is the color. And that's a quick way to identify between hardened steel and titanium.
Where you might want to introduce hardened steel, if the cafe isn't a very busy cafe, and you want to coordinate your burr changes with your machine servicing, you kind of want to look at that kind of that timeline.
Okay, that does make sense. I haven't actually thought about it from matching it to your servicing intervals, but that is actually a cool way to think about it.
Just gets everything done at the same time.
Perfect. And should we dive in and see this grinder grinding?
Absolutely.
So looking at the grinding on this machine, there's kind of 2 ways to go about it. You generally grind either into a portafilter or into a dosing cup. And as much as you can grind by hand into a dosing cup, a common thing to do is to bring in the scale platform and a scale for more accuracy. To replace the cradle, there's 2 socket head screws here, one on either side, and you can easily remove that and put in the scale cradle. And what that means is you go from grinding into a portafilter to grinding into a dosing cup with a high level of accuracy. So that normally happens into cafes that are kind of really wanting to get their consistent 20 grams spot on in and out. The cafes looking for a bit more speed or efficiency tend to grind into the portafilter. Is that right?
Yeah, look, we're finding that different cafes are operating more comfortably with the scale and the dosing cup. It can be used, so you can actually speed up with that if you've got a couple of dosing cups to use for workflow. But it's horses for courses on speed. It's just obviously we're going for a little bit more accuracy with the introduction of the scale hole.
So let's now look at the grinder, turn it on, and grind a double shot into the portafilter to kind of see how it operates, how it sounds, and how fast it is. And just putting that portafilter in. One thing that's really nice, it really does grind out to the center of the portafilter and makes very little mess for a grinder. There's always obviously going to be some grounds outside, but
yeah, absolutely. Like again, when the barista has to prepare now for tamping, having a grinder that's centered and the grind is fluffy, you're not having to redistribute, so you can get on with it. Yeah,
and that's really cool. And then the consistency between shots, they have narrowed it down to quite a small variance, haven't they?
Look, we'll always say for the grinders part of it, a half a gram deviation. That also depends on the roast, density of the beans coming through. We really want a really good roasted coffee, so there's even density.
For those really wanting to nail it down, you do have your purge button here, or it's not really a purge, but you do have your grind on demand button
Yeah,
there.
a little bit more.
A little bit more, and if you are using the scale with the cup, even easier.
Yeah. So once you activate the grind cycle, if you noticed from the scale that you need a little bit more, it's a momentary switch.
Yep.
You just tap it and a little bit more comes out and away you go.
Perfect. And when it comes to cleaning this grinder, at the end of the day or at the end of the week, we've talked about the clump crusher being super easy to clean. What does it look like from a blade perspective, from a top of grinder?
Okay, so having to disassemble for access to the burrs, you've just got to undo the cap screws for your worm drive and just unwind the top collar.
Yep.
And that will bring the opening of the burrs.
Yep. And from there, you can easily clean the burrs.
Yeah, you can brush out or vacuum. I like to vacuum.
And on this one, it is a top burr that remains fixed.
Yep, absolutely. So it's on the thread, so the bottom burr is your moving burr, and the grind adjustments via the top burr.
Yep.
So what you'll have to just do is indicate before you disassemble where your dial is.
Yep.
And you can go back to that position
Yep.
and you're still at the same spot.
Yeah, fair. That's cool. Sal, thank you again for coming in.
Pedro, it was my pleasure, mate. Glad to be here, glad to show everyone the SCODY.
And if you have any questions for me or Sal on the SCODY or any of the Anfim range, hit us up on the comments below and we'll both get back to you. And like always, if this video has brought you value, hit that thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. Sal, thank you again.
Pleasure, mate.